Well, welcome to this week's Walk Through Voices from Walk Through the Bible. We're reading with you through the Daily Walk reading schedule. Maybe you're listening to the Daily Walk podcast, or you just tuned in. And what we're doing is going through the entire Bible this year. And for the month of June, we are reading through the book of Psalms. And this is our second week. We're reading from Psalm 25 to Psalm 59. This week. As you read the Psalms, it's almost a bit of an emotional roller coaster as you follow along in the Psalms. There's highs and there's lows and there's all sorts of emotions and feelings and experiences that the psalmist record. In his book, Simply Christian, N.T. Wright said this about the Psalms. He says, they are inexhaustible and desire to be read, said, sung, chanted, whispered, learned by heart, and even shouted from the rooftops. They express all of the emotions we are ever likely to feel, including some we hope we may not, and lay them raw and opened in the presence of God. I find that to be a helpful summarization of often what we feel and experience as we read through the Psalms. It is a privilege to have these poems and songs in our Bible to help us express those feelings and emotions to God. But reading the Psalms, because of that, can also be a bit perplexing. And sometimes reading the Psalms can be intimidating. What do we do with them? How do we read them? How do we apply them to our lives? Usually in these Walk Through Voices, our team from Walk Through is sharing something more devotional about what we're reading and experiencing as we read God's Word with you this year through the whole Bible. This week I want to do something a little bit different. I want to just share 5 very specific tips as you read the Psalms that I hope will be helpful. Five tips for reading and understanding and applying the Psalms in our life. We're going to spend this entire month reading the Psalms together, and I thought that these tips might be helpful to you as we read them this month. So 5 tips to help you read the Psalms. Number 1, see the big picture. See the big picture. It's very easy when we read the Psalms to see a line, a verse, just one few words that's where we get stuck. And to see just a verse rather than to see the psalm. But often the psalm should be read in their entirety. And you're going to read through the entire psalm, but I would encourage you to not get too stuck on a specific verse and see that verse in isolation of the entire psalm. Here's an example of what I mean. Psalm chapter 42. This is a very familiar verse to many of us. Psalm 42, verse 1. As the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you, my God. That's a familiar line to many of us. It's one of those lines that we, write on a Post-it note and stick on our desk, and we commit that to memory. But we can't just read verse 1 without reading the rest of Psalm 42. And in fact, verse 9 says, I say to God, my rock, why have you forgotten me? Why must I go about mourning, oppressed by my enemy? My bones suffer in mortal agony as my foes taunt me, saying to me all day long, where is your God? Those are 2 very different expressions, different feelings, different emotions that are expressed in this single psalm. And my point is, as we try to understand the psalm, don't just get stuck on a single verse that sounds like something we might want to commit to memory, but rather read the psalm in its entirety and try to understand, what is the psalmist trying to communicate in the totality of the psalm? You'll see often the movement or the tone of the psalmist change. The psalm may begin with despair and agony and then end with rejoicing and celebration, and it's helpful to say, what changed in the mind or the thinking of the psalmist? So read the Psalm, seeing the big picture. Second tip, pay attention to the patterns. Because the Psalms are poetry, you'll often see patterns. You'll see parallelisms throughout the Psalms, two lines beside each other that say the same thing or that say different things. And those parallelisms will often help us understand points that the psalmist is making. There's often a structure to the entire psalm, and trying to step back and say, how is this psalmist communicating what he's communicating in the structure of what he writes? Over in Psalm chapter 37, you see some examples of structure, parallelisms of Psalm 37, verse 1. Do not fret because of those who are evil, or be envious of those who do wrong. He says the very same thing in those two lines, just using different words. But then down in verse 9, he says, for those who are evil will be destroyed, but those who hope in the Lord will inherit the land. Again, it's creating a contrast in those lines. Looking for those patterns, those structures of the Psalms will help us understand what is the psalmist trying to say in this particular psalm. See the big picture, pay attention to the patterns. The third tip is to immerse yourself in the imagery. One of the things that you'll notice as you read through these Psalms is there is rich, beautiful imagery that the psalmist uses to communicate. And I would encourage you just to take some time to think, what is it about this image that the psalmist is using that we should pay attention to? Here in Psalm 37, back at verse 1, do not fret because of those who are evil, or be envious of those who do wrong. Verse 2, for like the grass, they will soon wither. Like green plants, they will soon die away. What a captivating image that is. Those who are evil, those who do wrong, we could be envious of them because of what they have, or their status, or their positions, or their wealth. And the psalmist says, but don't be envious of them. Though they may look green and beautiful right now, a day is coming where, just like grass, that will wither away, like a green plant. It may look good now, but soon it will turn brown, and it will die and be turned to nothing. What a powerful image that is. This morning I was reading in Psalm chapter 57, Psalm 57, verse 1. The psalmist uses this imagery of wings. He says, have mercy on me, my God, have mercy on me, for in you I take refuge. I take refuge in the shadow of your wings. What a powerful image that is, to think about God with these giant outstretched wings, and He uses those wings to cover us, to protect us, to guard us. Just immerse yourself in the imagery of these Psalms. The fourth tip to read the Psalms is to break the silence. You know, I know if you're like me and you're reading through our daily Walk Bible reading schedule, often you may be in your office or in your living room or sitting at your kitchen table, and you read the assigned reading schedule chapters that day, and you're probably reading them quietly to yourself, silently. That's how most of us read things. But the Psalms, most of them were not meant to be read silently. In fact, Psalm 57, where we just talked about the shadow of God's wings, there's a notation at the very beginning of the psalm, for the director of music, to the tune of Do Not Destroy of David, Miktam, when he had fled from Saul into the cave. Now, I don't know what the tune of Do Not Destroy sounded like to the ancient Hebrew, but clearly this was a song. It told us what the tune was like. It was not intended to be read silently. It was written to be sung out loud. And I think it's very helpful to break the normal silence that we read the Bible with when we get to the Psalms. And we can read these out loud. We can try to imagine what it would be like to sing them, to put them to a tune of a song that we even know, and to break the silence and to use our voice out loud to think, what is it like to shout, to chant, to sing, to speak these words that were, in many cases, never intended to be read in silence. So see the big picture, pay attention to the patterns, immerse yourself in the imagery, break the silence. And the fifth tip that I would offer you is to linger a little bit longer. To linger a little longer in the Psalms. Last night I was traveling for walk through, and my flight was delayed by several hours, and I got home a lot later than I wanted to, and I was going to get home and then eat supper, but I ended up not getting food before I got on the plane because of the delay, and I got home and it was late, and I was trying to rush to the house to get home and hadn't eaten, so I pulled off the interstate and went through a fast food drive-through, and I just sort of scarfed down a meal. It was just because I was hungry, and it was a purely utilitarian exercise to get myself fed. And contrast that with going to your favorite restaurant and sitting down with one of your favorite dishes, and where you just want to savor every bite, and you just want to taste every element of every piece of food that's on the plate. Listen, I know what it's like. We're reading through the Bible on a reading schedule, and the schedule is busy, the calendar is full, we've got a few minutes, and it's very easy to just fly through these chapters that we're reading every day. Can I challenge you, as you're reading the Psalms this month, maybe just take one psalm and just linger a little longer? Just pause, reflect, think, meditate, pray the psalm, and just break the pattern, the speed with which you often may be reading the daily walk reading schedule, and just take a minute to linger a little longer. And I believe in doing that. God can speak to us in powerful ways through this book that we're reading this month. Well, listen, I hope those tips are helpful to you as you are reading with us the book of Psalms this month. But more than I hope the tips are helpful, I hope that you will not miss an opportunity to spend time with God this month, reading and reflecting in this book of the Psalms. We'll see you soon.